Landing a trilogy sure is tough. By the time any movie series reaches 3 films, fan expectations are of course so high and so firmly set that it's incredibly easy for filmmakers to lose sight of what the audience wants, or maybe even worse, lose sight of why they were passionate about the narrative in the first place. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie trilogies that had the worst endings. Number 10, the Star Wars sequels. The middle entry into the Star Wars sequel trilogy, that of course being Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi, certainly didn't please all fans, but it did at least represent a bold narrative step forward for the sequel trilogy, pushing it into uncharted waters. Rather than building on the foundation though and trying to develop its plot points in a way that might please its fans and win over the people who weren't so sold in the first place, following the substantial backlash, director J.J. Abrams decided to fashion threequel The Rise of Skywalker as a glorified apology for that previous flick. In turn, he delivered a finale to the new 3-movie arc, as well as the entire 9-film Skywalker saga that pretty much pleased nobody. The Rise of Skywalker ultimately walked back or downplayed many of The Last Jedi's most interesting ideas, while dusting off Palpatine for another villainous go-around, cramming a bevy of new underdeveloped characters into the roster, and basically delivering the least imaginative conclusion to this story possible. What should have been a triumphant and emotional climax to a trilogy that got Star Wars back on track was ultimately a deeply frustrating exercise in filmmakers trying to turn back the clock. Number 9, The Mummy. Brendan Fraser's The Mummy franchise wrapped up with a thudding clanger of a threequel with 2007's The Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Even with the evident excellence of Jet Li playing an antagonist who morphs into a damn 3-headed dragon, the third Mummy was hobbled from the outset by Rachel Weisz's decision not to reprise her beloved role of Evie Carnahan. And no disrespect to her replacement, Maria Bello, who is a fine actor by the way, but she did lack the electrifying chemistry with Fraser that Weitz had, ensuring the emotional core of the movie was flaccid from the outset. On top of this, it was a bland, soulless action-adventure romp packed with mediocre VFX and a patent lack of fun. Even though The Mummy Returns wasn't great, it at least felt like everyone involved had enthusiasm for making it. Whereas Tomb of the Dragon Emperor felt like a hollow, perfunctory payday in its very bones. Number 8, X-Men. The first 2 X-Men movies remain one of the strongest 1-2 punches in superhero movie history. The first helped pave the way for so many other comic book films at the time, and the sequel one-upped its predecessor in basically every way. Of course, X-Men The Last Stand is infamous for killing the franchise for years, and it's all thanks to a major creative shift as the writers and director all jumped ship to make Superman Returns. So in came director Brett Ratner, who you could just tell did not care about these characters or this story, attempting to cram together 2 massive plots, those being the Dark Phoenix saga and mutants losing their powers, which results in all-out war. It was totally overstuffed and a major mess. In fact, it was such a deflating ending to the original X-Men trilogy that 2 movies later, it was retconned into oblivion with prequel-sequel X-Men Days of Future Past. Number 7, Jurassic Park. The original Jurassic Park trilogy stumbled into a bit of an awkward conclusion with Jurassic Park 3, the first movie in the series not actually based on a novel. Tellingly, Jurassic Park 3 struggled to rustle up a convincing reason for Dr. Alan Grant to return to the dinosaur-infested island. But even if you could forgive the contrived setup, this is basically overall a dumber, less interesting version of the previous 2 movies. You've got some of the most annoying performances in cinema history, goofy sight gags that make absolutely no sense. I mean, look at the dinosaur eating the sat phone, and most offensively of all, an utter non-event of a climax. Jurassic Park 3 clocks in at just 92 minutes in length, largely due to the film going into production without a completed script, such that director Joe Johnston was forced to figure things out on the fly. Yet he evidently never put a proper finale together, as the film just ends when the heroes make it to the beach and are suddenly saved by the US Navy, which were called in from afar by Ellie Sattler, played of course by Laura Dern, who literally phones in her performance. Audiences understandably expected the third act to ramp up into a battle between the Navy and the remaining dinosaurs, but instead the film abruptly cuts to credits. Number 6, The Hangover. Now, it is admittedly glaringly obvious that The Hangover should have never been a trilogy anyway, and let's be honest, 2 movies was already pushing it in a way. Yet, the original 2009 comedy was such a massive surprise hit at the box office that there was always going to be more. And after The Hangover Part 2 made more money than its predecessor, why wouldn't they milk the IP for one more go-around? And while Part 2 was basically just a Thailand-set remake of the original, Part 3 saw writer-director Todd Phillips shift away from the prevailing formula towards a glorified thriller with a comedic fringe. Phillips was seemingly bored of the series' template himself, but by placing the wolf pack in literally mortal danger and pivoting to a more violent, mean-spirited tone, the laughs quickly dried up. It was ultimately a miserable ending to the trilogy and made no bones about the fact that everyone involved was only here for one final fat payday. Number 5, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man was a great movie, but his Spider-Man 2 remains one of the greatest in the history of the genre, so expectations were understandably, perhaps unreasonably high for 2007's Spider-Man 3. Now, I personally am a Spider-Man 3 defender. I think this movie absolutely rules, but even I concede that as a finale to a trilogy, it does have its problems and does not live up to the epic second flick. And that's because in every fiber of Spider-Man 3's being, it's painfully clear that Raimi just wasn't a fan of villain Venom and had no business adapting the character to the big screen. From the miscasting of Topher Grace to the supervillain's underwhelming visual presentation, I mean, as much of a defender as I am, I cannot defend this design. It just didn't work. And that's without getting into the overabundance of supporting villains in Sandman and Harry Osborn, while the script also ill-advisedly retconned a key aspect of Uncle Ben's death, which majorly rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. It just tried to do too much and ended up feeling like an over-egged meal of a movie that lacked the charm and emotional clarity of the first 2 flicks. Number 4, RoboCop. Though RoboCop 2 wasn't great, it still delivered some thrilling action sequences and benefited from Peter Weller's returning presence as Alex Murphy/RoboCop. Weller was unable to return for RoboCop 3 though, resulting in him being replaced with Robert John Burke. But the real kicker was the decision to give the film a PG-13 rating, ensuring that it lacked the signature brutality of its predecessors. Beyond this, the script is just a mess, as RoboCop feels like a supporting character in his own damn movie, and by the time he shows up flying a jetpack, it feels like the series has partially become the very thing that it was initially satirizing. If the original RoboCop genuinely had something to say about American society, the series ultimately limped to a whimper with its third entry that had more in common with a toy commercial. Number 3, the Divergent series. Now, to be fair, the Divergent series wasn't ever very good from the jump, but at least every other trilogy on this list did have some sort of tangible, recognizable ending. Yet Lionsgate made the quite frankly greedy decision to adapt the third and final book in the series, that being Allegiant, into 2 separate movies. And so when the first part, that being the Divergent series Allegiant, underperformed at the box office, they just decided to not make the last part and call it quits. They just decided to not make the finale. As a result, fans were left with a trilogy devoid of a satisfactory ending that should have been a quadrilogy. Though attempts were made to finish the franchise off as a TV movie, these quickly fell apart amid the cast's utter lack of enthusiasm, and that was that. No matter the consistently low quality of the films, it still sucks that fans who paid to see the first 3 movies had to watch the series end on an unsatisfying ellipsis. Number 2, David Gordon Green's Halloween. David Gordon Green's Halloween sequel trilogy functioned as a belated postscript to John Carpenter's 1978 original, jettisoning the many weird and bad sequels from the continuity while establishing its own new chronology. And Green's 2018 Halloween Legacy sequel was indeed a massive breath of fresh air for the franchise, suggesting that the director intimately understood the characters of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers and also appreciated the elemental fan appeal of Halloween. Even with sequel Halloween Kills disappointing so many fans, there was still faint optimism that Green would land the trilogy in a satisfying fashion, especially with the marketing for Halloween Ends focusing on Laurie and Michael's epic final battle. Except this wasn't what Green wanted to do at all, and he instead decided to get very, very weird with his trilogy capper. Ultimately, Halloween Ends reduced Laurie and Michael to supporting characters in their own finale, with Green vaulting off to tell a mostly tangential story about a young man called Corey who inadvertently crosses paths with both Laurie and Michael. The end result was a finale that pleased few fans, hardcore or casual, by shifting its focus so drastically away from the core components before then circling back to finally become a recognizable Halloween movie deep into its third act. It will be interesting to see whether or not public opinion turns around on the film in the years to come, but given just how vitriolic the early response has been, it's not looking terribly likely. Number 1. Poltergeist. The Poltergeist trilogy wrapped up with an especially sad and dispiriting finale due to the devastating circumstances surrounding its production. And that's because young Heather O'Rourke, who played Carol Ann Freeling in all 3 films, died suddenly during post-production of Poltergeist 3, and because the studio required large portions of the third act to be reshot before release, a stand-in for the actor had to be used. Given that even director Gary Sherman didn't want to finish the film following O'Rourke's death, there's unsurprisingly a patent lack of passion and enthusiasm evident in the final product. Bar some impressive in-camera effects, it feels like a major step down from Tobe Hooper/Steven Spielberg's original, and even the already not good second movie. In the very least, Poltergeist 3's poor box office performance did convince producers to put the IP on cinematic ice for almost 30 years, until 2015's aggressively mediocre remake. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about these trilogy cappers, and are there any bad ones I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, could you please also give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.